Get started. We'll start with the call to order and the roll call. So this meeting is now called to order. And you want to do the roll call? Do you know everybody here?
You guys can remind me, please.
Okay.
Everyone know this is Amy. Erica's on vacation. She was with us back when Erica was on maternity leave.
Right. Melissa? Teresa. Arlene Zorman.
Jenna.
Josh Ronaldo. Tom DeVee.
Lauren Sully. LJ.
Sarah, any public safety?
Amy was not the admin assistant.
Molly O'Donnell.
Quincy Williams, LJ.
Okay, good. It's exciting to see that we actually have a full board here. So if everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes for the May 13th meeting, I need a motion to approve. I'll make a motion to approve.
So I think we'll just be getting votes from those who were here at the time.
And I'm second.
There's one error in number 7, because we will have issues with painters in the shipment of meth detectors. That should be Penrose.
It was a few of us.
Yes. Yeah. Wrong GC. So just you should update that to Penrose. Well, and not even Penrose. It would be who's the contractor?
The meth detector provider.
Yeah.
P Alert, another
P Alert.
Meth
Meth alert. Nothing works.
Yeah, are they even called P Alert anymore?
That's the contractor where we're getting them from.
Yes.
Did you guys get them yet? Or they're still on the way?
Here.
Okay. It's been, Terry made the motion, I seconded it, and with the changes, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great. Minutes pass. I don't see any public invited to be heard. Okay. All right, organizational updates. So welcome new board members. We have 3 board members with us today, or one that is returning, one that is coming back, and a new one. So I'm excited that we have a full board. And I think it'd be nice if you guys wanted to say a little bit about yourselves, and we can say something about ourselves too, if you really want to hear. So, Jenny,
Jenna Reed, president of the board. This is just a continuation of last time. Do you want to say anything else?
you feel comfortable with.
Local landlord, we own 25 minutes here in town.
Josh Ronaldo. I've lived in Longmont about 4 years. We own a home in Southmont Park, and we'll be here forever. My day job, I'm the director of operations at Mercy Housing in Denver, which is the largest affordable housing nonprofit in the country. We do not have any practices.
My name is Tom DeVee. I took a little hiatus from being on the board, and I'm back. I'm a CPA, work for CU as the accounting director there, and I've been in Longmont for over 20 years.
You missed us.
And I miss you guys, yes, that's why I'm back.
We always come back.
Arlene, it might be nice if the other board members gave some introductions specifically for
Right.
Josh.
Right. So Glenn, you're kind of in the middle there.
Glenn is super involved in the city's landlord-tenant mediation and landlord-tenant alliance, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. My name is Arlene Zorman. I've been on here for several years. It started when it actually was in COVID. So it was on Zoom, but it's much nicer to meet in person, I think. And also during the time that the city was taking over. So it's been exciting to see the changes, to see the development that's gone on, and the other things that have happened. So we're glad you're here.
Carrie again. think you heard a little bit about me because we did interviews and some of you guys. I have a legal background, especially for criminal law as a prosecutor. Civilly, I did a lot of construction defect and contract review and insurance coverage stuff. So that's my background, and I also live here in Longmont, and I've been here for about 6 years and really love it.
I'm Melissa Berry, I'm the city planner of the city of Longmont. Oh, not Lafayette, sorry, I was in Longmont. I've been in Longmont for about 20 years now, I can't believe it.
Goes right back.
And I've been on the board.
So I think you should do staff as well. Yeah. Start with Karen.
I'm Kendra Daniels, I'm the accounting supervisor. I joined LHA in 2021. And we've just been moving and grooving ever since.
My name is Quincy Williams. I'm the regional property manager for LHA, and I'm in charge of operations at the property, and the property managers keep things going there. It's my best friend. Love helping her with whatever she needs. So yeah.
So I'm Lauren Sully. I am the assistant director for LHA. I oversee operations, maintenance, and the Thatcher team. And I used to be on this board. I started with Arlene in 2020 and Tom, and sort of stayed on the board until I took the role and had to step down, which created a vacancy. So yeah, that's why I said we will stay around. Yeah, I've been here for over a year on the LHA team. My background is the legal world. I did paralegal work for like 18 years. I used to work for Boulder County. Then I transitioned over as a developer for Boulder County Housing Authority. Built some of the properties here in Lafayette, and then transitioned to this job. So.
And Lauren, you were really responsible for a lot of spoke, right?
Oh yeah, I was the project manager.
Yeah.
Spoke on
Sarah, I'm a police officer with our public safety department. I've been with the city for 18 years now. Been in law enforcement for about 26 years. I started our crime-free housing program back in 2010, and I've been moving and grooving, like Kendra said, since then. We have about 215 properties in our program, and that's really how I got involved with LHA back in 2010. And past how many years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I've been pretty much their public safety and health liaison regarding the housing program, and then just working with the staff, working with the properties, working with the residents on really anything you can think of. So, it's a small summary.
I'm Amy, I'm an admin assistant for the city manager, and I've been here since November.
Molly O'Donnell, I'm the housing director. So in Longmont, the city and the housing authority are combined under one umbrella. I've been in the housing division for, it'll be 10 years coming up soon. Worked on the city side first, then we took LHA in-house in 2020. So I've been working on LHA stuff since. And then in about 2021, we brought it all together and I became the director. All right, so I just wanted to recap what our terms are for each. We keep track of everybody's terms, and we'll keep everyone apprised of upcoming application periods, etc. So we have Arlene's term. First of all, we were doing all that shift for a couple of years to try and get everybody on a solid June 30th expiration date, and then having staggered years so that we don't have everybody leaving at once, or re-upping at once, I should hope for. So Arlene is through June 30th, 2026. We have Josh, Melissa, and Glenn and Carrie through 2027, and then Tom and Jenna being the new repeat offenders, got the latest term limit, which is 2028. Okay. Josh, I think that if you're interested, what we can do, rather than going over there's a lot of history of LHA, and what we've done is kind of an onboarding to kind of go over that history. How did we get here? What is LHA's lines of business and that type of thing. So I think that I would work to set that up time with you to do that at a time that works for you. Because I think that'll be helpful before the next meeting. Today's maybe just kind of absorption of where we are in the world, because lots of our items today are about how the world is impacting us versus the other way around. So we'll work to set that up if you're good with
That
that.
sounds great.
So Tom's been off for a couple of years. Do you want to be part of that, Tom? There may have been some things that kind of happened during.
Yeah, I'll be, yeah, just send me an invite for that.
Okay.
I mean, I could go.
You've been here,
Yeah, you,
Okay. Items for input to the LHA Board of Commissioners.
so I don't have anything on this agenda today, partly because we kind of covered this stuff in advance. What is going next Tuesday, July 15th, is the private activity bond inducement resolution for the Atwood Commons project. We kind of did a primer on private activity bonds in the May meeting as we were sending, because Atwood had to go to City Council first, and we were analyzing how LHA plays a role. So we kind of talked about that one already, but that's coming down the pipe. This one is not really a discussion-worthy item, but we have to do a delegation of the executive director in the EIB system. It's related to voucher funding. It's very much a straightforward piece of paper, so it's not really worthy of discussion, but I'll just let you know that's going. And then we're going to be talking about the federal budget impacts and voucher funding shortfall updates with whatever information we do have, which we are going to cover today, so we'll hold on that one for now. So that's it, just an update there.
All right, resident quality of life. I assume you're gonna
I'll just
talk about
mention
those
for
things later.
yeah, for Josh's sake, this one is one we put on. It's kind of a more board member led agenda item, just things that ideas that come up, or if people have approached you at all, what you'd like to speak about. We often don't have. Sometimes we will have some things coming from the staff proposal side, but this is kind of open conversation.
Okay. Rising issues in housing.
Okay, so let's talk federal budget a little bit. It's quite early to really tell what's going to be happening, but we do know that the reconciliation bill was passed last week. In looking at it, it is quite quiet on everything HUD. There is obviously a lot about Medicaid and SNAP benefits and a lot of other things, but what we've been looking for is HUD programs. So I just am seeing this morning that the Transportation, Housing, et cetera, committee is planning to meet on July 14th to actually talk about now what the HUD actual dollar impacts will be. So we don't know much yet in terms of exactly what's coming down the pipe. We know that the reconciliation bill did talk about expanding tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, which was great, and it talked about a lot of bonding. It's very technical stuff about bonding, but lowering the 50% test, which makes it easier for housing projects to use bonds to build, so that's beneficial. But then when it comes to the Housing Choice Voucher Program, what we know that is being talked about out there is the work requirements, which it looks like it's primarily raising the work requirement from age, it's about age 54 to age 64. So it seems to be, there's a lot of talk out there, but it's looking like it is targeted more to that element. It's for able-bodied adults and then raising the working requirement age. That's what we've seen so far as in association with the reconciliation bill. So we'll see how that ends up actually getting implemented at HUD. Also, there's a lot of talk about the Housing Choice Voucher Program coming down to the states via a block grant system. In my mind, if that happens, that's more accessibility to work on issues. However, if I don't have a lot of trust that all of that federal income that went to cover that is going to get transferred to the states as well. I would feel more like, I'll just say states cover it and states don't necessarily have the funding source to cover it. That's a little bit of opinion there, but that's what I'm watching for to see how that ends up shaping. Nothing out there, no actual dollar values around housing choice voucher, or CDBG, home, any of those funding sources that HUD operates that we use for housing. So we're keeping an eye out. So has anybody heard anything beyond that they would have questions about or have more information than I do?
So I have a question about how much you guys are gonna be involved in the work requirements under the HC housing choice. Or is that gonna be handled through another?
It depends on how HUD writes it up, but I would expect that we would have to be involved with this because we do their income qualification is really where a lot of that is tied to. Lauren, do you have any thoughts about that? Have you been mulling it yet?
Because I don't even know what that would look like.
We have no idea really. This is all conjecture. But I bet if we manage everything else related to the applicants, so I would expect that they would expect us to do that again.
Did they put in the clause that limited it to 2 years? I read that.
I had heard that being talked about, but I didn't see anything about that yet. But again, that could come later when they actually get it to HUD and they start really crafting what it's going to look like. So.
My biggest concern with this bill is the decrease in funding with SNAP and Medicaid. It's going to put more pressure on our tenants financially, which indirectly could affect us as we see defaults in the future as well.
And it's going to affect civil services, which are already strapped in organizations.
So it's just pushing pressure on municipalities, counties, states in order to deal with the financial default.
Without actually providing them any funds to do so.
Exactly.
Push it down. More local connection is great, in my opinion, in terms of the 20 years of working in federal, state, and local. Not without no money though. So,
Yeah, not along those lines or anyone, it's just more of a question. Do we have any sort of precedence, I don't know, or any sort of idea about how block federal grants being given to the states would then be managed locally? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but going back to sort of the second point you made, like is it going to be the state therefore putting, again, I know this is all conjecture, but have we run into something like this before? Because it seems like a consistent theme is sometimes the state is asking for requirements that are just simply not helpful, including moving people from place to place and not setting people up for, success, therefore in their communities. I just don't know if we've dealt with any sort of block funding issues like that before.
So the CDBG is a block grant, and I will say it's all coming from HUD, so they could say, oh, we already have a block grant, let's model it after that, that seems to be working fine. In that instance, what happened in CDBG, what happens is the states have funding for non-entitlement communities. Entitlement communities like Longmont, which is based on population, get theirs direct from HUD. So, and then the states, for those that aren't big enough to be entitlements, the locals apply to the state in their block granted funds. I think that, I don't find that to be any more efficient than the way it is now, if that was to be done for vouchers. Either way, if they do all of it to the states and then the states distribute to all of the PHAs, that is a massive change, and it will take a long time to design that program and implement it. Because the states have never had to pick up a program, and the HCV program is the most complicated program in the federal government, in my opinion. It is so that would be real interesting.
It does take a certain level of expertise of getting there, which I don't have. And it also seems like there may be real issues with staffing and just you guys having way too much on your plates then and having to get additional people as well. So
Another concern I have is, I've been reading some things about how they, a lot of HUD staff took the optional early retirement, and now they are so low on staffing that they can't get anything done. We have not received our CDBG actual grant agreement yet, which usually we have by now, at least the last couple of years. And we will talk about this in a moment, but getting a HUD rep for our vouchers has been a nightmare. So I am concerned about that. Like, how are they proposing big program changes? Not sure if the money stays with it or not, and who's going to do it? Who at HUD is going to design this and push it down? So those are some major worries. On the other hand, HUD is, at least on the funding side outside of the voucher program, it is the Wild West out here. We will follow the rules because we are well versed in them. Nobody's watching. Nobody is monitoring. Nobody is answering questions when we ask for technical assistance. There's nobody there. So we know what to do, but I bet a lot of communities on that side are like, I don't know what to do with this. So, any other comments?
What was your favorite budget?
Yes.
And voucher funding, so for both of those, right?
So I think overall, I'm gonna let Kendra pipe in here, but we got incredibly great feedback in what was that, like March or so? Right before everybody took the early retirement, or right when it was starting to happen. We had an amazing rep that gave us a ton of information. I think we've talked about that already. Thank goodness we had that, because that has carried us the last couple months, so we haven't felt completely in the dark. But now our HUD rep has changed, how many times?
We're in the fourth.
We're on the fourth, and we haven't even met numbers 2, 3, or 4 yet. So
They're not local, they're not in Denver, right? They're
St. Louis,
St. Louis.
one was
It's local now.
local
Sydney
now
is now local. She's in
Okay,
the Denver office.
For now.
for now.
They moved to Sydney and she's in the Denver office.
An office that might stay open.
So we are continuing to monthly analyze our voucher shortfall funding situation. Like, this is for Josh's sake, we are in pretty much the middle of the road of most PHAs in the Front Range, which is about 1 to 2 months of shortfall of funding. Oh, I bet Harold wants to talk about federal budget. We're right there in the mix. We have taken a couple of steps to prepare if we need to take some steps around our voucher program. What we have done is we're about to submit a waiver request to HUD to allow us to change the payment standard without the extended notice to people. And that's because HUD approved payment standards up in 2024, or fair market rents, et cetera, in 2024 that were super high compared to before. They dipped in 2025, and so now we have some people at 2024 when our fair market rents and our payment standards are all leveling at 2025. So we're hoping to, if we need to implement this, be able to kind of shave off that bit to help preserve some funding. So that is the one step that we are having in our back pocket ready to rock if we need to use it. We've been crafting a list of other strategies. We have not implemented them yet. We have not presented that full suite of options to the LHA board yet. We've been talking about the challenges and where they're stemming from, but there's a lot of things ranging from changing the number of bedrooms allowed for the number of children to, the big red button is kicking people off the program, which is what we're trying to avoid. So a couple of things have happened since you all last met 2 months ago. One is we are still projected to be in shortfall, but we did get notice from this rep, our newest rep that we have not yet met or talked to, but she did say that applications for shortfall funding are, start preparing it, which is a good sign. That means there at least is shortfall funding even being talked about for this year. So that's good. Also, we've had, Kendra, what was it? We had several people, we had a lot of attrition. What was that from again in the last month?
Well, so we started in January with 421 vouchers, we're down to 400, so we've lost 21. Some of that is people porting out and other agencies absorbing them. Some of it is fraud, where we've had to kick people off the program because they weren't paying their fraud balance, and so after so long, you have to give them, you can come in and pay it in full, you'll still retain your voucher, but if you don't, so we had to kick a lot of people off the program just for that.
We had an uptick recently, which attrition meaning people leaving the program either because they have to or they just are not in the program anymore. That is the easiest way to, because we're not going to refill their voucher at this time. So that's the easiest way to get down under our shortfall threshold. And note that through this all, we signed an agreement to commit 18 project-based vouchers to the Ascent project. We signed that right before our shortfall deadline last year, and so their HUD is honoring that, even though they said do not sign anymore. And so we're trying to commit to fulfilling those 18 as well. So we need to get the voucher funding, or should say spending down enough to fill the 18 and also stay under that shortfall limit. That's the goal. And if we can't get under that shortfall threshold, then we're going to be applying for shortfall funding.
So Molly, for the vouchers that you guys have had to take away, are those people still allowed to stay in the facilities if they pay the full amount, or do they have to move out?
So it depends. So if they're in a private landlord situation, they can stay if they can pay it. If they're in our properties, if they're in a regular LIHTC unit, if they're committing fraud on their voucher side, then they can stay in their unit, but they'd have to meet that rent amount. If they're in a project-based voucher unit, then it depends on where that fraud is coming from and whether they can actually stay in that PPP unit or not.
I only have Boulder County voucher holders right now, but I have a couple of lifers that have had vouchers since forever. And their obligations were always zero, and this month I got notices on both of those two that had their obligation now is like it's small, nominal, like 135 or 150. That was super interesting because they've always been at that zero number, and now this is the third notice I've gotten that it either increased or for the first time ever adding an obligation every time.
Okay.
So that's what I'm seeing from the other.
So that could be a couple things. It could be their payment standard kicking in from when it was 2024 last year, depending on what the timing of their lease up is, or that could be Boulder County pulling levers.
I kind of figured so because these are people who never paid,
Yeah.
I've had one for 8 years and she's always paid zero, or her obligation is zero, and now it's like 135. So I thought that was interesting. And so I got notices on all of them, either increasing or adding for the first time ever.
So one thing that we did in recent years was we always had a minimum, this was on a PBV, or this was at the suites, at the property level or on the voucher
We're
level?
actually, that's
across
one
the
of our triggers that we might have
And it is on the voucher level.
add back.
Okay.
We took it away, but we might have
Right.
to add it back.
So we used to have a $50 minimum tenant paid portion for our property, specifically the suites, so those that are super low income. We were ending up having to evict for non-payment because multiple months of that, it doesn't add up to very much in actual dollar value, but it's multiple months of non-paid rent. This was a couple years ago. And so we actually eliminated our $50 minimum back then, so we wouldn't be evicting people for $300 of unpaid rent. But that might be something we have to put back in because it would save us $40,000, is that what you said? So That's one of our levers that we could pull. We were hoping to be able to present all of these options to the board in July next week, but we haven't gotten our meeting with our shortfall rep yet, so we need to have more information first.
And we have applied, it's in Carol's court for agent.
Shortfall funding.
It should come via DocuSign from HUD.
So Josh, this is Harold Dominguez, he's the city manager and the interim executive director of the health authority.
So on voucher funding, that has been a topic of discussion at Colorado Municipal League. I've had some meetings with different agencies. I think everybody's clearly saying that no one will really be vouchering out probably for the next 3 years. And so almost I think every one of us are actually drawing down through attrition on vouchers, just based on what they're seeing. The other challenge with this is when you look at the recent legislation and the continuing resolution, I think that's what it is, otherwise known as the Big Beautiful Bill. There's a significant shift in voucher funding, I think, contemplated in that bill where PLAD will no longer administer the voucher funding. It'll be a block grant, it'll go to the states, and then the states will distribute that. So
We can talk about that a little bit.
yeah, what that means, we don't know. I mean, the state has notoriously, when we had CDBG-DR and other things, taken their maximum amount of admin cost out of it and then moved it forward. So I think those are things everybody's waiting to see what happens. I think what's going to exacerbate it is some of the Medicaid adjustments and what that means as well. And the punchline on the other side of it is at Colorado Municipal League, basically the state will not have any money to backfill it. Counties won't have any money to backfill it, and cities probably aren't going to have any money to backfill it based on financial performance. And so there is there's some significant changes coming that will impact people. But I just think what we're seeing, at least in Colorado right now, is from a budgetary perspective, everybody's struggling. The state had a $1.2 billion shortfall. It didn't look like the next budget's going to be great either. I think counties announced that they're going to have to make some adjustments, and right now we're evaluating our budget because what we're seeing is we're still waiting to see what happens with the new property tax number, simply because of the adjustments that they made in the last legislative session to the commercial and residential ratios. We think that's a product. I think Boulder, you may have read about Boulder instituting a hiring freeze, and their shortfall was $10 million. And part of that was property tax. We hedged a little different on the city side, so our property tax numbers for this year are good. It's really sales and use tax that we're watching. And frankly, we're not in as bad shape as some of the other places, but we just don't have a lot of new revenue. I think we're about a percentage, 1.8% behind where our projections were this year, which compared to what other people are experiencing, that's not a bad thing. So in terms of backfill options, I say all of that because there's not really going to be an option to backfill.
We touched on some of this too. Any other? Is there, Kendra and Lauren, is there anything I should mention about vouchers that we didn't talk about with what we know today?
No, the only thing I know right now is, as of right now, we have $212,000 in shortfall for this year. But we're looking okay for next year, but we also have to add the 18 PPP vouchers, which is probably going to fall in January. It would be awesome if they fell, or at least some of them fell in December, because that's how HUD determines our budget is by the ending number for that year.
So
That
what
might
she means by that is, the ascent is contracted to be complete in February. They are cruising. They have talked about December and January. We also have talked about leasing up in December is terrible, but also having the PVVs on the contract, on the property in December could be helpful, so we're just kind of
We're still
weighing all
projecting
those,
18 in
yeah.
December for HUD.
Well, and I think that that's what none of us really know is what's going to happen with HUD. I mean, everything we have known about how this process works is completely in a state of flux right now in terms of what is that going to be. Because if they give the block grants to the states, you know, they'll probably run us through shortfall included in that block grant number. But then it'll shift to the states, and then the question is what do you do for shortfall if it's a block grant to the state? You're sending that money. I just think the paradigm shifted. So everything we thought we knew about HUD and how we work this is probably we're in a changed condition right now, and I have no clue what it's going to look like.
Well, how soon could it shift over to the state for the block grant?
26.
We're saying 26.
Yeah, because I think that continual resolution is for 26. And it depends, right? So they're doing some odd things in this. So like everyone's talking about Medicaid cuts and things like that. The Medicaid cuts are kind of interesting because they're not set to take effect until 27. So politically, there's some tactical pieces in that, right? So you're not cutting Medicaid before the midterm election. So there's certain things you don't know when that's going to hit because that's why everybody's digging into this to understand what's hitting when because it's not consistent within that bill.
So Harold, last year you were really tight on staff hiring. Is that going to be the same this year?
Potential for the city?
For new, yeah.
Yeah, potentially. That's why we're watching the numbers right now pretty, the CFO and I are talking a couple times a week. We had better results. So from the city's perspective, unlike other places, one of the things we've done over the last 13 years is basically we've created 2 stabilization reserves. And so the stabilization reserves are specifically designed for situations like this where we can draw down on them to not have to make drastic, well, we're going to go on a hiring freeze or we're going to, I think Boulder eliminated all their temps. So we're watching our stabilization reserves and we're watching our margin right now on our sales and use tax. And so we're not at the point where we have to make those types of significant operational decisions, but we're watching it on a monthly basis. It's really use tax that's driving this. Ironically, our sales tax has been decent during this period. It's use tax that is really the headwind for us. In some months, we've had as much as a 30%. We were 30% behind budget. Now, it's all relative. I don't like the percentage points. I just got a new computer, so I can't open my email up. But it's all relative in terms of the number and what we're seeing. But so the use tax did better, but we're 14% behind for the year versus where we were 24% behind last time. So it's how we do month over month and compare month to month. But yeah, it could be a tight one, and in terms of level 1 expenses only, and those are like must-pay bills. But I don't know, and so we're trying to be. We don't want to be alarmist, but we want to be realist, and kind of what we're seeing. The big answer is going to be the property tax money. That's really the one that's going to tell us what kind of capacity we have. So yeah. gonna have a fun budget year.
Okay.
Good.
You're
Good.
Okay, let's go to development and then project updates, update on operations.
I will take this one. For Josh and Tom, just wrapping up our Village on Main project. This has been officially wrapped up for construction for several months, but just some updates. We finished up all of the paperwork with our investor, et cetera, got our last developer fee payment in this phase of the project. And so we are officially done with Village. I was just driving by this morning and thinking that was getting that project started was one of the first things that I did when I became director, and it feels like an eternity ago and also yesterday. But I'm super proud of the way it looks just going down. So we are wrapped up. That was, for Josh's sake, that was a re-syndication rehab of 72 units, senior housing right in downtown, right there at 6th and Kaufman. And it was a great project to work on. And I hope all of the residents are happy with their new, quiet living environment.
There are a few people that kind of grumble, but
They always will.
they will regardless, yeah.
It really was a fantastically well done job.
It is.
It's a great
It's
place
so
to walk
pretty.
into.
Mhm.
The units are fantastic. So congratulations to everybody.
I'm excited that we have such high occupancy there typically, and then anybody that moves in, just excited to see their reaction when they say, this is low income housing. Ascent, so this is 75 units of family housing, heavily geared towards families, because we have a lot more 3 and 4 bedroom units than is typical for a light-tech project. It's super hard to finance, but we got it done. It also has an early childhood education center attached, and that will be, we have an agreement with Wild Plum to operate that center once it's open. So we are been in construction since last November, and September maybe? Anyways, that feels like a long time ago too. And slated, like we said, to finish either the end of this year or very first of next. Construction is flying, everything is looking great. So we're just constantly in touch, working on construction aspects, but then also in touch with Wild Plum to make sure we're preparing for them to be able to fill those slots. The center is geared towards income qualified families, no private pay. At least if it is going to be private pay, then it would be, we're working on maybe a sliding scale. The reason we're talking about that is our first choice route was filling with CCAP families. CCAP has been frozen, so we might still have CCAP families, but they'd be coming from another center. And then second choice was Head Start, which would be moving, they are very well versed, they do a bunch of Head Start program work, moving some of their Head Start slots over. And then our last one that we're looking at, which would be a new business model for them, but they have a new director and their board is supportive of looking at this, is if they have to do a private pay, looking at a sliding scale. But of course, that just results in a funding gap on the cost to actually run it. So they're looking at their private donors and that type of thing to see how that could work. What we're heavily in right now is preparing our marketing and leasing plan. We're working with Wild Plum to make sure their families are very well versed on what's coming so that their existing families can try and get in. We're going to try and do a marketing effort with children, youth, and families, including an info session that helps get all of those the families that are engaged with the city and in need well versed on what's coming. And then are trying to work with our city communications team to get the word out broadly, because this is a project we started this project as a big old dream of merging all of the benefits of the city and the housing authority together, and how can we do multiple benefits and that type of thing. So we should start celebrating that and market that pretty hard. So we've already gotten some inquiries on interest and when is it going to be available for lease, et cetera. So we're setting up right now an interest list, and then in September we'll open the wait lists for the units generally and the PBVs that are attached to them. And so we're going to be doing a lot of marketing between now and September to get that hopefully to be a very successful process. With move-ins in probably January. So that's where we are.
So I usually go by there at least a couple of times, and it really is moving nicely.
It's going so smooth that we have a whole bunch of contingency money that has not been needed to be spent, and so now we're trying to figure out what can we add. We kind of hit a lot of our wish list. There's one thing that's on my wish list that I don't know if we're going to get, but it's also not a super value add to the residents. It's just for aesthetics and design. So we're trying to figure out what can we add. So that's all going on right now. But that's generally a great sign that construction has gone very well. I'm pausing in case there's questions about Ascent, so I'll keep going.
Where's this located?
It's about 18th and Hover, up behind the Walgreens, near Hover Crossing Liquor, and our Hearthstone and Lodge properties are right next door. So speaking of Hearthstone and Lodge, looking at our exit from the HUD 202 program is what Katie has been working on. Katie's our development project manager. She's been working on for a few months here, and we're getting very close to narrowing down what path makes most sense. So I think by next meeting I'll be able to share with her what the plan for those properties is. But in general, we're in the 202 program. We would not like to not be in the 202 program, but what's the right path for that and the timeline, et cetera. So we're putting that together. We're still exploring opportunities for something in the South Main Transit Station area, morphing into a business model of attempting true mixed housing, so affordable middle market. We're talking to potential partners and looking at land and seeing what might make sense for that. So that's our next hopeful next new big build. And then there's a couple highlights I wanted to share. Last year, Boulder County in their sustainability programs. Last year, Boulder Housing Partners made an unsolicited request for an allocation of their budget to help support sustainability and efficiency projects at their properties. And so they contacted us and they were like, we're considering this, what about LHA? So we took their money and about $200,000 and put that into the Village on Main solar panels last year. And now they want to make this an ongoing funding source for BHP and LHA, which is really awesome. And I think I'm assuming BCHA as well, but that's kind of internal. And so we just did a walk with them and Energy Outreach Colorado to identify our needs list, and it sounds like we have an immediate need for a whole slew of HVAC system replacements at the suites and also at AMN that is typically we would be able to handle in small quantities as if one is, breaks and we can replace it, but looks like we're having we need to replace pretty much all of them. So we're targeting that for this year, and then this is a little bit bigger of a project, so it's going to take some more planning, but the Spring Creek Swamp Cooler is on the list as well to get replaced. That building was built in 2018, and it has HVAC systems for the units, but the common areas, there's no true AC, it's a swamp cooler. We've had concerns about moisture, it's also just not efficient or effective. And residents have wanted that to get replaced or fixed for a long time. So that's now, we have an identified funding source. It's a big project, so it's gonna take some planning and some talking with engineers about structural, et cetera, but that's gonna be in the pipeline.
So in addition to the HVAC and then the swamp cooler issue, and yeah, swamp coolers are terrible, by the way. They're everywhere.
We're all looking at each other like, why did this get into this
They're
building?
everywhere in New Mexico, and you can't get it down from like 20 degrees of how it is outside. It doesn't sound that bad until it's over 100, and
Right.
yeah, they're the worst. Were there any other issues? I'm just thinking about, I know Boulder County's doing things in terms of like windows being energy efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So did they point out anything on any of the other properties, maybe more down the line, but that they'd be willing to look at this?
So they didn't walk every property. We walked the ones that we knew were probably high priority because,
Okay.
for example, the lodge needs new windows, but we're also figuring out are we doing this with a project or what's the timeline? So we kind of, for now, had them focus on the couple properties we knew didn't have at least a funding source coming, which were Suites and Spring Creek, and we actually had them walk Briarwood as well. But I think the priorities are pretty, the higher ticket items that are more slim dumps are set out now. But yes, Windows is something that they would be able to help us with. We have that need.
What amount of funds do they have?
This year, it sounds like about 200,000.
So Molly, I know that there have been several instances of elevators with problems. Do you anticipate that that's something that we're going to look at?
No, it's not meeting their sustainability goals. Elevators aren't good.
Yeah, they just do real high for every time it doesn't work.
That's what I have for project updates for today.
Occupancy report. So I added a little extra to the side. One day we'll get a better report than this one. But I wanted to show it's going down.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's
Down
see.
units are zero, I think that's great.
Not only do we not currently have any down units for meth, we also are filling our units. There's been some situational factors for some of these properties that have attributed to not leasing units. So we'll go through these for everybody who's new. Aspen Meadows neighborhood. Was B2 down with meth when you were on the board still?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been years. It is leased, finally. So that's a huge one. We had 3 vacancies, now we only have 2. That one can be hard to rent just because of they're 40% units, they're multifamily. So we're trying to get families in those units. Aspen Meadows Senior Apartments, there was a flooring issue that fell under the warranty process for this project. This was a re-syndication that was started by the previous LHA organization leadership and transitioned over to Molly. That was like, you were in the midst of that project when you started. And so that re-syndication completed, and there was a flooring issue due to not being really the right product, and it was not installed properly. So we are actually in the end stage of replacing or reconfiguring that flooring material at that property. So that's why there's been a lot of vacancies there. 2 of the units have been held vacant so that the contractor can stage and utilize those units. That was important for us because we didn't want the common areas to be overrun with construction materials and equipment, causing hazards for our residents. So we have 6 units vacant right now, and that one is actually, we have an urgent need to rent that because we're not meeting our debt service ratio. So that one is a priority. Fall River, we are down. 1 unit got leased, and so we have 4 vacancies there. We have a reduction from 5 to 2 at Spring Creek. the Hearthstone, and the Lodge, we're holding at 3 and 5. Now we have pretty much leased up everything at the Hearthstone, where we have applicants pending move-in. And then at the Lodge, we have 4 vacancies actually right now. Suites, those are, that is a unique property. Half of the vouchers are administered by Clinica Family Health, formerly Mental Health Partners, and the other half are administered by LHA. So we get those clients directly from local case conferencing and waitlists that we manage. So we typically try not to have vacancies there, but due to the nature of the program and unfortunately just sometimes we have a lot of vacancies.
It's same vibes.
It's a problem everywhere, not even just in PSH. Village on Main, we have 2 vacancies, potentially only one. We have an applicant who is making a decision on a unit. And then Briarwood, we had 2 units vacant for a long time and now have 1 vacant unit there. So we're seeing some movement. There's some more details down below. We have our vacancy loss down at the bottom as well. But what I really want to talk about with this,
That $236,000, is that about what we were this time last year?
probably, I mean, we've had,
That's just a question.
yeah, the same vacancy in some form or fashion. Some properties have been harder to lease up. Some properties have just had multiple deaths, especially last year in the fall. This is sort of a cyclical thing with seniors.
This is what we think we're going to be able
I hope not.
No, we're
Our goal is to
before
improve
this, yeah, we were hovering at 96, 97% a couple of years ago. But A, circumstances, like Lauren mentioned, and also B, we're hearing that, even light tech rents are
They're
too tough for when we have a very high senior portfolio. That's super hard. So we're hearing that some people simply can't afford it anymore. So
Where are they going?
it's anecdotal, but some are moving in with family, some are leaving Colorado. We don't have great data overall because we don't do like an exit interview about why you're leaving, but it could be a number of things.
So Molly, I thought at one time you had mentioned that you guys were going to looking at possibly adjusting those 50%, 40%, 60%. We're going to talk about.
So what, quick question on this one, what are we shooting for in terms of our occupancy rates?
It should be
Would be ideal.
97, 98% consistently. That's what we budget for because you're going to have vacancies, you're going to have turnover. There's just been a significant amount of turnover, just for your sake, history-wise. Last year when I started, we had a lot of key staff turnover, and a shortage of staff on the maintenance side. And so there was a lot that we were just getting by. And so vacancies and unit turns were not always a priority. Yeah.
That's stabilized now.
Yes.
Turnover.
What's your average day after a turn? Like how long is this meeting? Do you have like a property by property?
We don't actually have a good report for that. And that's something I was meeting with our maintenance supervisor yesterday in our one-on-one looking at the reports that we can get out of Yardi, and we need to probably create our own ad hoc report because what it's pulling for what he's pulling isn't giving him actual data that's useful. So we're going to try to fine tune that, but we also need to improve our process. And the data is only as good as what is entered. So if the staff aren't following a particular process to enter that data, enter start dates, end dates, then it's not going to provide us with anything. So we're working on that process too.
No appointment already.
The goal is to have everything in Yardi and get valuable reporting.
Yeah, no, I just want that part of it.
I don't want to have to do manual reporting. If we have to, we will. But I think that's what Yardi's built for. So there's got to be a way to create those reports. The data's in there.
And they've got to figure out a way to code it, like in terms of low touch, medium touch, high touch, math touch. Because if you just look on aggregate in terms of the unit turn time, if you factor in all the meth units, it's out of
It's
control.
gonna skew the data.
It's gonna skew the data because those meth units are just outliers in time. You also don't want to do it to your low touch points because that's going to skew the data as well. And even excluding meth, like we've had a couple of fatalities where you had to do a biohazard cleanup, which then is more like a meth unit. So they've got, I think once we can figure out how they can use it, it's almost like coded as low, medium, high meth biohazard, and then we can actually give a report on each one of the categories, which I think is more useful from a data standpoint to really evaluate what is that turn time for that particular class.
Is there a way to feed Yardi data into like Power BI?
Well, actually, I was gonna add to this that our additional position, creating the senior, Heather will be in charge of doing monthly reports, and one of them is a vacancy, like unit turns, because unfortunately, even though as much data as you put in the system, there are different modules. And so you either have to ask Yardi to build the report for you or data mine and then build it yourself. So that's her first task.
And
So
she will
let me
be
know what other reports you guys want to see.
way better at manipulating data in Excel than Patrick will.
Yes.
Everyone is terrified of Excel. I
Yes.
think it's a wonderful tool, but it can be terrifying if you're not used to using it. So.
Just so I don't have the historical context here, these vacant or days vacant vacancy loss numbers are they pretty standard to what we've seen in prior 6-month periods. Again, you mentioned cyclical nature of some of this. So just first half of the year versus last half of the year.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to do a comparison, but I can bring that to the next meeting.
If that's not too difficult, that'd be great.
It shouldn't.
Yeah.
Just pull the same time frame, compare.
Yeah, and I think if you, to your question is, if you look at normal turn, kind of just what you would consider normal renter to do, I think it is relatively consistent in what we're seeing. The outlier that Lauren talked about is because of the number of senior units, we do tend to see a higher number of mortality impacting that than you would in a typical situation. When we talk about low, medium, and high, then it starts looking a little different. And I wish there was wood I could knock on. We were having, up until probably last year, a significant challenge with meth contaminated units. And that's just a different world altogether in terms of what we're doing. But I do think if I'm thinking about our senior units, we can predict that, the fall, we're going to see some turn in the fall. We can also predict that a lot of it's due to mortality. Unfortunately, talking to our senior services department, that's not uncommon for older adults and, Thanksgiving, Christmas time frame. What's changed in this is what they touched on earlier, is people being able to afford to live in Colorado generally with just the overall inflationary pressures. And I think we're seeing that show itself a little bit more now. And it's really showing itself in the 50 to 60% AMI units. Those are becoming the hardest to fill. Because they're 60% AMI units.
60% one bedroom.
Even 50%.
Yeah.
The 2-bedroom 50% were last year were really
They're
difficult.
tough to fill too. One bedroom 60% is going for almost 1,700.
That's
On a fixed income, so give you guys some context behind that too.
So I'm just looking at page 6 of our packet for today. And, at the top it says that there's been record vacancy causing a strain on LHA financially, and I know you guys have covered some of the details in there, but that doesn't, I guess it doesn't really seem to be the case though. It seems like you guys were talking about, like it is cyclical. It's very helpful that you included, additional information about the improvements, what stayed the same. So is it record vacancies, and is there like a time period that that's referring to? It just seems like a very I mean, obviously looking at it and looking at your email, an area of fairly large concern, but now it seems in our discussion that a lot of this is expected, even with outliers.
I think it's been an issue for LHA for the past few years to
Okay.
focus on unit turns and
Yeah.
filling
So that's kind of what
It is,
that's
yes.
going towards.
That is us.
So that is, okay, yeah.
There's been a tension between having applicants ready and calling people on the wait list and getting that process in line with unit terms.
Right.
What I experienced when I started last year was, and this is just one specific set of a CM and maintenance dynamic at one particular group of properties, where the maintenance person responsible for unit turns said, well, they told me not to work on the unit turns because they didn't have an applicant. You always have an applicant. You should always, as soon as you get a notice to vacate, you should be working on a new applicant. You should be calling the wait list and having someone lined up.
Absolutely.
And then the maintenance team should be working on their unit turn regardless of the applicant status. These two things need to operate independently and together. So getting our staff to understand that need has been difficult.
That's really helpful.
We also had one admin calling people on the wait list from the office instead of having property managers manage the wait list themselves. When they are in a better position to do so. Given the number of vacancies that we've had, Quincy has kind of taken over that role temporarily, but that will be going back to the property managers. This was mostly because we were working on getting the wait list pulled into Yardi. It was complicated, they had to learn the process. So while they've been utilizing the wait list in Yardi, Quincy's been kind of taking Fridays to do, almost acting like a leasing agent, and calling people, getting them scheduled for visits and things like that. So
It's not the info, just like finding an applicant.
Yeah.
Oh,
it depends.
I tell them that I can move as fast as they can. So if
Did they have an option to
yeah, if everybody has to give a 30-day notice of
Right,
where they're
exactly.
at, so we honor that too. So yeah, as long as they're communicating with me about it.
And they pay
I
a
can-
deposit.
Yeah, and they pay a deposit, of course. Yeah, we can make something.
And that's kind of the art that they have to play with is you can't necessarily give someone 3 or 4 months if you have somebody that can move in a month. So that's the art of this conversation. I think they've talked about a few things that have been really important that they've all been working on is A, staffing capacity. I think this is the first time in a while where, at least as I'm being briefed, I think you all feel more comfortable with staffing capacity and where we're sitting both on the maintenance side and the property manager side. I think structurally, when you look at Lauren in this position and Quincy in this position, it has created a different capacity to, and frankly, Quincy's knowledge on the yard. So when he came in, he was seeing things that we weren't doing, and Kendra didn't have the capacity to do it. And so I think we have a better partnership now in terms of how we're trying to figure those kinds of things out. But it's a structural issue, it's a staff issue. So you have all of those things in play, and then on top of that, you have that 60%, 50% AMI issue that we were touching on earlier. Because what's happening is people can't, you either don't make enough money to move into those units, or you make too much money to move into those units. And so that is what's creating something else, but that's more AMI specific than the 60% and 50% AMI. But I get briefed on those calls, and I think they're now moving in a space that it's kind of, this is for your information, it was like complete and utter chaos when the city took over. We were just trying to, I think Tom and Arlene are the only two left from that period. It was literally just trying to manage daily financial expenses. to then we kind of plateaued and we said, okay, we can breathe, it's not a complete emergency, and then in that plateau, then all of a sudden you uncover other stuff, and then you kind of go into chaos and plateau. And so I really think for the most part of these things, they're kind of at, I think we're at a plateau where we're just going to keep moving slightly up, and we'll have periods, but not to the extent of where we're still uncovering certain things. Because it was like the minute I think we thought, we were like, okay, we think we've got this tiger by the tail, something would blow up. And we would start, well, where did this come from? And it was as simple as when we thought we were balanced, all of a sudden Kendra gets a call, oh, a balloon payment's due on Briarwood. What? We couldn't find that anywhere in the documents. So it's just things like that, but I think we're in a more stable period. And honestly, they're doing, just so you know, they're doing such a good job that on like their weekly check-ins, I'm kind of letting them handle it, and then they brief me on those check-ins because it's part of the succession planning thing that I've been talking about with Molly. I'll come in whenever they need me, but I'm not seeing the critical issues come out of that. And I'm more sliding in on the development side with Molly, looking at other projects in terms of revenue generation and things that really truly interfacing with the city. But yeah, they've done a great job. But yeah, those are still things that they're doing, and I think the more we can get the data focused in, it's there.
I think in the private sector too, there's a real saturation right now in the 1 and 2 bed. I've actually had, for the first time ever, difficulty renting one of my 1 beds. Like, it's just sad, you know, like for 30 days, which never happened before. And so once I think in that sector, because there's just so many coming online right now, in the private market, people, I noticed that Notch property off of 66 was offering 3 months of free rent plus only no deposit.
DCHA is giving rent away for free at Willoughby Corner, which is a brand new development.
So the 1 beds are tough to fill right now, and there's a real, like, there's so many, I mean, they'll level out in a couple of years as those new projects fill. But where I'm seeing my rents being able to have rent increases is in my 3 and 4 beds. In the last 2 years, we've sold off. Yeah, those will rent like crazy because the last couple of years we've sold off most of our single family homes into the private market. They're no longer rentals because they're paying them whatever. So that's definitely happening. You're seeing private landlords like me get rid of their bigger, which were single family homes. Like I had some that had been rentals they never not had been rental, and then they sold to someone, you know, who's going to live in it and own it. That's great, but that'll no longer be a rental again, and that
puts the strain on the apartment market.
And so like the Arrive, which is the new development, you know, off of Pace, their 3 bedrooms are starting at $3,000 a month. So anytime I show one of my 1 or 2 beds, like they're all looking for, well, do you have a 3 bed? I'm like, I haven't had a vacancy in my 3 beds in years, but if I did, I could go up $200, $300, $400 in rent on those. And it just doesn't exist, that segment right now. But the 1 beds now, they're just sitting.
Do you think that, I wonder if people are looking at the roommate model, instead of looking at 2 beds and up?
Yeah, the 1 beds, I mean, I think there's just so much in the market right now, so much to absorb, that it just, that's usually where your profit point is, you know? Is the 1 beds you're making more money. But right now they're sitting, and so yeah, I think a lot of people are teaming up. There's, you know, well, we could get a much nicer place. I have that in one of my 3 bed duplexes right now. It's 3 roommates, and I actually have a couple of those now, because they're like, well, we can get this for $2,400, or I can pay $1,800. You know, between the 3 of us, we can get this really nice place with a yard and a garage and whatever for $2,400. Versus I can pay $1,800 for this 1 bed that has none of that by myself. So I'm definitely seeing that. But people are just desperate for the 3 beds. I get calls, I don't know, just unsolicited from friends of roommates or whatever. When are you going to have I need a 3 bed, I need a 4 bed. And, you know, nobody's moving out of those units either. And it doesn't matter, like I actually reduced rents in my 1-beds and I raised all of my 3-beds at least $100 and no one even went to okay.
As soon as we have our interest list up and running, we'll share it with this group, so you guys can share that out too. Because we will have a good number of floors.
So I'm wondering with the vacancy, especially in the 1-beds, it's just gonna be soft for a while. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and something to think about for the discussion around middle income. I know that there's a lot of back and forth of like, okay, if I had to choose between an 80% unit with that I have to income qualify for versus a market rate, I'm gonna choose the one that I don't have to give them a bunch of paperwork. But I have a friend who just immigrated here, he got his green card, and he is actively looking for an apartment. And the disgusting amount of fees that are tacked on for every single, like
It's
air
wild.
breathing fee, carpet
Common
usage
space.
fee,
Common space, vacuuming,
parking
I've seen.
fee.
Yeah, even for surface, the Notch 66, they charge surface lot. Like it's not covered, it's not extra, it's not in the garage. And so I saw that in their ad, like 3 free months of rent and also waived surface lot fees. I'm like, oh my God. So the number they're listing, which hopefully that new fee law will address a little bit, that comes online in January when they actually have to roll that in. But the rents are gonna,
That means the rents are gonna increase.
they will, so maybe it'll make it easier because people can see like the apples to apples number.
But like vouchers, they won't cover those costs.
Right.
If it's not truly rent, they will not cover it. And we've actually had our previous, what was her title? Susan? Susan Sloan.
Community relations specialist.
Yeah, she was complaining a lot to a lot of legislators and politicians and locally in the state because voucher holders were being evicted because they weren't paying fees, and the voucher didn't cover the fees. So they were actually, and you're not supposed to evict people for fees. So they were struggling with that already. So yeah, if I were in the market for an apartment and I could guarantee like lower rent increases because it's with a housing authority, and yeah, I've got to income qualify, or I can go private and get $300 increases every year, I would rather stick with the 80%. But I'm hoping that that's what we get if we're going to do it.
I think though that's some education of, it's just unfortunate like in the, because right now they're not advertising that and people, it's not the actual truth of what they're not paying what they think they're paying.
And they need like a
Until
truth
they
in
actually start.
lending.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like in real
Thank
estate.
you. Yeah, so I think maybe with the new legislation, I'm never a fan of any additional legislation, but
That would be.
that one I was like, because we have our apartment unit, we pay for water, sewer, and heat. That's just included in the rent, and so that's probably $150 for utility, that is included. That makes it hard for people to see when they're lowering the base rent, but they're also charging. That's an add back. It's a bill back. Where in mine it's included. So I think that's hard for people to actually visualize that. So maybe that'll help.
There may be a question on that legislation because, again, in the continuing resolution, they passed something that said, I think it got, again, trying to check, I think it got included is states can't regulate the use of artificial intelligence, of which that is kind of what was behind
the rent algorithms.
The rent algorithms and things like that. So there's a question of whether.
I think they pulled that out.
Did they pull it out?
They pulled that out. That when it went to the
back to the house.
They pulled that back.
Okay.
That's right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene was really upset about that.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just I just remember that was a thing at CML. The other thing at CML that everyone talked about is, to your point, is there may be a lag in 1-bedrooms. And depending on where you are, they're even seeing some of that in 2-bedrooms in certain areas of the state. But what they were saying is it's really a temporary reprieve because what we've had is such an increase in building that, we added supply very quickly. But the state demographer, when you start looking at for sale product and what people can afford, they're also anticipating that that's going to be a relatively short window. They were saying 12 to 24, and it'll vary by market because then people will start moving around.
Longer here, we've got a lot of units.
Yeah.
We got a lot of units. So I'd say in the next 2 years, but then you'll see that number tick up again. But you might not, you might have trouble, you might struggle with that occupancy. Of no fault, even if you're doing your terms and everything as best you can.
Josh, have you seen any of that through your work in Denver? What they're kind of talking about? Like, is that your impression that it's statewide that some of that stuff?
These struggles are not unique to Longmont. We've got operations in Denver and Durango and all those places, and it's
Typically one bedrooms or.
and even in our properties in other states, we have kind of these
So I'm still working on following the Durango properties. Like
Well, my time,
2003.
but yeah.
2003.
A lot of people are also going with the deficit of the one bedrooms, they're moving to the extended stay Airbnbs, because those are a lot cheaper, and everything's included. I have a guy who's battling with one right now between us and Airbnb, because everything's included. I mean, yeah, you have to live with somebody, but it's still cheaper.
Cheaper than
Cheaper than income restricted, which is,
Our AMI is very high.
yeah.
How is the one bedroom square meter? Is that
It did show us that it showed that every affordability and bedroom size would fill, but it showed a distinct lack of high bedroom unit and size product.
And that's not getting, that's actually getting worse as people sell off their single family homes.
Yeah, we actually have a meeting with DOLA coming up, more on the Prop 123 requirements about that issue. Because the way that DOLA structured it, it is more punitive to places like Longmont, where there's been a historical push for affordable housing, and the fact that we had such a high number of naturally occurring affordable units, it kind of messed us around in the calculation, and so
Punishing us.
it's punishing us versus if you take a city that's never done anything, their requirement's much lower. And so that was another one at CML where I was able to grab some of the DOLA folks and really talk to the people I needed to talk to versus kind of that mid-level position where and they were like, oh yeah, that's a problem, we need to talk. And I think before I even got back, they were trying to set up a meeting to talk to them.
And it's DOLA also looking at your income of all your citizens. But, like walking out, same thing. It's historically lower folks. So there's been a need for that housing rising. Some of that, most of it is legit, but it's a state of wealthy area that doesn't have
A lower need.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. So they basically pulled census data on incomes and what your average rents are, et cetera, and just smashed it together.
So they do look at
So our need was high.
right.
And
but you
also
would
our
think
production
that-
is high if you consider how much communities generally produce.
Right.
But,
So you would think they would still give you. Because what they do, the percentage is that big is that.
It's more what we're required to build to be compliant with Prop 123. Yeah, no, it's counterintuitive to what they do.
That's what happens when people that don't work in housing write legislation.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things.
And if you're interested in seeing where this region stands with deed restricted affordable housing, through the Regional Housing Partnership, which we are part of, has a dashboard that's housed on Erie's website. So if you just Google Erie, Colorado Affordable Housing Dashboard, it has, they're just hosting it for now. It'll move.
To the RHP website.
Yeah. You can see each jurisdiction and then together the goal for 12% affordable units by 2035. You can see how each jurisdiction is doing and take from that what you will. But just in case you're wanting to know what's happening in this region, because this is a regional issue. I feel like Longmont has disproportionately, and the city of Boulder even, have bear the burden of affordable housing, whether naturally occurring or purpose-built, and funding changes depending on where you're at, planning fund depending on where you're building. All these things affect our ability to build housing. So, I feel like Longmont's been really progressive. There's been an alignment between the city and development of affordable housing, but we're still not there. So,
But Willoughby is what's helping. It's just the timing's right that we got forward exactly.
well, DCHA built Josephine Commons and Aspenwall in Lafayette, so you guys actually have a, relative to your population.
We have a lot of
Yes. So yeah, it's interesting to see the numbers and the progress. To get back on track with this, so we're not running over. Property updates. We're working on irrigation issues at Spring Creek, so you might, if you're in that area or from that area, might hear complaints about the grass dying, and that's because something's broken. And so our maintenance is fixing that. We got one of our contractors to basically give us some free help, which was really great. Annual inspections were happening at Spring Creek and Fall River. We're getting ready for another monitoring by, I think, our lender or investor at Fall River. Aspen Meadows Senior, the flooring work is scheduled through the end of this month. They're working on the first floor and 88 units, and then we will be done. The residents and the staff are ready for that project to be over because it has been super disruptive to operations and to just our residents overall. Aspen Meadows neighborhood apartments, we have the camera installation underway. Hearthstone, we had a fire flood at that property like 2 months ago, and so we've had remediation work ongoing, and we are waiting on permits so that we can rebuild 2 of the units that were heavily destroyed. And they're staying at a residence and hotel. Luckily, this is an insurance claim, so we should recoup the funds for a lot of these costs. The lodge, we're looking into carpet cleaning. The suites, we have elevator upgrades scheduled in mid-August. This is the elevator project that we paid a significant amount of money for last year, and then basically the elevator company forgot about us. And they had a massive turnover of staff, and so we had to make a little bit of difference. The door project of the suites was awarded to a contractor, and we're working on getting that contract signed and get that project started so we can wrap it up by end of September. We're just for your guys' sake, the suites is permanent supportive housing. It was a rehab from a hotel, an extended stay hotel, so not purpose-built, not trauma-informed. The doors at the suites have a 1-inch gap underneath them, and so sound, light, and smells carry. The doors are also hotel doors, so when you walk out, they lock. So you have to have your key with you all the time, so we have a ridiculous amount of walkouts at that property, which then we charge to the tenants, and these tenants typically don't have a lot of income. So we were awarded $200,000 of CDBG, not DR, funds to do this project, and so we're going to be replacing all the doors, all the hardware, and making it feel more safe like an apartment. And also prevent lockouts. So now when someone leaves, if they just walk down the hallway, they don't have to lock the door, though they should. Just like anyone, you should protect your home. But they'll have to carry their keys with them, and we hope that will cut down on a lot of complaints, some issues, and lockouts as well. Because that is a burden on our staff to go out there after hours and let people in. What else do we have here? Briarwood, camera installation is scheduled next. We were looking at plans for an LHA staff workday to help address some of the needs at Briarwood. That is not a super cash flow property, so we might do some sweat equity over there with the landscaping and just sort of beautification. That's 10 units, and then the old LHA office is attached to it as well. And Veterans Community Project Outreach just vacated the office side, and so we just have the 10 units and their studios. So those are when we get into the market.
Did they pay rent or is it
They paid rent, yeah.
But you might do that.
We haven't scheduled it yet. I don't know if I want to do it in data. So.
Well, yeah,
might end up having to. But we will make sure you guys, if you wanna come and help out. I think that a lot of places give you like volunteer time as a PTO. I think LHA or the city does like a volunteer time. Do they do a volunteer benefit? No.
They do like city-sponsored volunteer opportunities where it's just, it's just regular work time and not necessarily for.
Village on Main, forestry removed 2 ash trees in the back due to emerald ash borer. And so they'll probably replace those trees. Residents are very active, hosting events and meetings. I would say that is the most active property we have. Between community events, resident-led events, they have meetings weekly, it seems. So they keep busy over there. General LHA updates, Yardi implementation is happening in phases. We've already completed doing our wait list online management-wise on our end. The next step in our process will be the application for wait lists going live so that you will apply online. And we're going to roll that out ahead of Ascent so that we have just one streamlined process instead of accepting paper applications. The next phase would be our move-in process, including re-signing and document management. Then payments for tenant rent online, and then finally work order management for tenants and staff online. So we're rolling this out in phases so as not to overwhelm the majority of our population of seniors that are not looking forward to doing things online.
Make it very efficient.
It will make it better for us.
What's your target date to finish?
It kind of just depends on previous phases as they roll out. So the application for the affordable module, the waitlist application process will be soon, because we're gonna open up the Ascent waitlist probably second week of September. So that will be coming soon. And that we will do in conjunction with senior services, children, youth and families, and then we're probably gonna have like workstations set up out in front of LHA's office with staff to assist for people who are not familiar or who don't have access to a computer. And then we'll also get some documentation and support to the library for people who go there to use their computers. The rest of it will all kind of just as it happens when we're ready. We don't have target dates just yet. It's kind of all built on each other. We talked about the Boulder County Energy Outreach funding already.
Will the applications tonight also be in English and Spanish, or is it, you already support that?
Oh, let me check on that.
Okay.
We've all done testing, and now I can't remember because sometimes it does ask you in certain scenarios if you what your language is, and we let them know like what main languages we need that they can select. But I don't know if we've actually tested the Spanish one, if it does allow us.
We should Maria do a
Yeah,
test.
I can have Maria do a test, yeah.
I mean, our
Absolutely.
applications are in English and Spanish, so I would imagine we would want the online applications to also
Oh, yeah,
be
exactly, yeah, to mirror that. And does it have that capability?
It should.
Yeah, I think it does, but I don't think we tested that piece of it.
So we'll have Maria test it.
I'll have Maria test it.
Um,
She can add herself to a wait list.
Put your information on.
The Briarwood office is vacant as of this month. We are in the process of brainstorming ideas whether we're going to maintain, sell, what we're gonna do with this property. There is a mortgage on it, so we gotta make a decision sooner or later.
And is it separate from the apartment units, or I don't remember, is it
It's
part of the
packaged.
building? Okay.
Yeah.
That's why we're analyzing.
Gotcha.
Very, probably a limited pool of buyers, so.
No, so we've not spoken to Briarwood residents about this as a possibility. So it, in no way, shape, or form will anybody be displaced, just for the public record, no matter what we do. So we're just exploring what's the best fit.
Marketing efforts, so there's a document that Amy's gonna pull up. Because we had those record vacancies, back on May 22nd, we sent out a marketing email to any and everyone that we know in this region that touches housing or could potentially have clients or affiliates. That email is attached to this packet. So we think that these vacancies are due to a lot of factors. The economy straining people's finances, rising costs of living in Colorado, life changes for our population. Social Security benefits do not keep in pace with rising inflation and housing costs. And the AMI rents in Boulder County are just really high. And people look at our affordable rentals and say that is not affordable, especially for seniors on a fixed income. And then there are seniors who have good money but don't qualify. So we sent this email marketing blast on May 22nd, and we've been working. Quincy's really taken the lead on getting these units filled. Like I talked about before, the extenuating circumstances at Carstone with the fire and the flood, and then at AMSA with the flooring, cost of land some of those units. And then we're also evaluating, this effort versus reducing rents for harder to lease units, including the studios at Briarwood, which are expensive. And they're not LIHTC rents, they're just 50% AMI tied. They're tied to 50% AMI. And then some of our 50%, 60% units. And so if you look at this report here, this will compare what we advertised in May to what we currently have either new or remaining. So we advertised 4 units at Spring Creek. 3 move-ins are scheduled or have already happened. So we have 1 remaining vacancy. And you can see the rents that are associated. Can you make that a little bigger? And then we have a new vacancy because people still keep moving out as we try to fill units. So I have that captured down at the bottom, new or remaining. Then if you move on to Fall River, we advertised 1 unit. We now have 4. 3 vacated, 2 vacated recently. One of them has a move-in scheduled. And then 1 was actually in the process. It wasn't advertised because we had an applicant who then withdrew just recently. So now we have that vacancy accounted for. At Aspen Meadows Senior, we advertised 4 units and we now have 6. We had 1 person transfer to another property at LHA, to the Hearthstone and Lodge because of just the high cost of rent for their unit. And then we had a death at the property as well, so that added those 2 other vacancies. 2 of these units are being used for staging for the construction company, so those are the ones that will be available potentially in August, assuming they are left ready to rent. So we're hoping that the company will be clean and ready.
So the problem with the 50% AMI units, is it that we're having a hard time finding people that meet the requirement of the AMI, or is it they're saying that the rents are too high?
They're saying the rents are too high.
Right.
For fixed income.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of people who only make $2,000 on Social Security.
Right.
So and we will not rent to someone who doesn't meet the 2 times the rent amount. Because we are not doing them a favor by putting them in a unit that they will not be able to afford.
Right.
They will fail.
Yes.
And we do not want to be responsible for that. Aspen Meadows neighborhood, we advertised 3 units. One of them was B2, and thankfully that unit is filled. They moved in on the 3rd. We have 2 more, and you can see that they're 40% units, but we've struggled to find people that qualify and make enough money in order to rent these.
Do you still have a place open for a property manager there or not? Aspen Meadows.
No, we have a property manager. It's Summer.
And she lives there.
She doesn't live there. No, we don't have an employee unit. Those aren't factored into these because they are technically down units. So, and there's only 1 person right now residing in an employee unit, and that is at the suites. We have someone here.
And these are 2-bedroom units too, right? So
Yes,
these are more
2-2s.
favorable? Yeah.
And they're townhome style, so they're really desirable.
I have a showing today at 11:30, so wish me luck.
Yeah. Hearthstone, we had 3 vacancies. Those are all scheduled for move-in or have the applicant pending. So hopefully those will materialize into filled units. The Lodge, we advertised 5 and we still currently have 4. That one, usually we don't have trouble renting those units. I think for this, it's just a matter of calling people, and what we're finding is you call and the phone is disconnected. And you gotta move to the next one. And they're not ready to move. And so working through that wait list, trying to get through.
And this packet?
So this is not in the packet because this analysis was not ready yet. Yeah, this is not. Then we had Briarwood where we had 2 advertised units and 1 has a move-in scheduled. we may want to consider lowering the rent to fill a studio. They are less desirable. We've had a lot of people come and look at them and say no thanks. But it does include the utilities, so that is something to consider. But these are not LIHTC, so that is a business decision on our end. And then, of course, Village on Main, we advertised 2 units. We have 1 potential applicant for the 60% unit, but frankly, that amount is really high. Even though they can afford it, they don't want to pay it, and I don't blame them.
You can get a 2-bedroom in a private or less. My 2 beds are less.
My brother for a 2-bedroom apartment pays about $17,000. So, yeah, that's the person who is trying to decide between Airbnb or
Remodel and location do help in this site, but maybe not that much.
Those 2 things are the main reason why we moved to this location and remodel. So it's just the price of this one. And with Hearthstone and Lodge, the 3 for the Lodge, I found 3 for Hearthstone. I found this yesterday. I just started working that way this yesterday. So the 3 just came up when I started. So the other 4 at the Lodge will be filled very quickly once I'm able to sit down.
Well, and location, you take a look at Spring Creek and Fall River, which have nothing around them. The Hearthstone Lodge, at least with some groceries and all that kind of stuff. The same with Village. So yeah.
And then we have the studio. It is a 30%, but again, studios we're seeing harder to rent. We're even at a 30% rent, people are not willing to live there. And we actually were calling people yesterday. Phones were turned off. So it's interesting.
Too much space.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the results of the marketing, and this is marketing like this, like the email that's in your packet, is not something that LHA has done in the past. I wouldn't say it's because they didn't need to. I just think, kind of in line with your comments, Carrie, on the historical nature, like we weren't getting at it. And while I don't want our staff to live in a mindset of like, we have to rent, it's like this is our livelihood. Rents pay our bills. And so we don't, while we have a target of 97% vacancy, is approved, is totally fine. I want to see it, 100% occupied all the time, to the best of our ability, because it's money in our, it's money for our seniors, money for our residents.
How do we set the rents? I mean, if we're having people, you're talking about having a loan rents and all that, what are we using as a baseline to set them?
So it depends. So every year HUD sets the rents, CHAFA disseminates them. Those are the AMI rents that we have to use, and those correspond to the income limits. When you let's say you build a new project, you usually have to pick a year that you're going to use as your benchmark. So you might, if you're building in 2024, the 2024 rents come out, you might say we're going to use the 2024 AMI rents. But you don't lease up till 2025. 2025 rents come out and they're higher, but you're stuck to 2024. So that's what you have to market. And then as you do your rent increases, you can get up to the 2025, but you do so with the detriment to your tenants. We are cognizant that rent increases in the population that we have are very hard for them to absorb because of the Social Security not keeping up with the increases. So we try to keep that in mind when we do increase rents each year. And I believe during COVID, there were no rent increases. So we are already years behind on catching up. Some investors, when you're filling out your partnership agreements, will require that you market the max CHAFA rents. They will not allow you to offer lower rents. Some places will underwrite rents lower just to create a buffer so that you can lower them. We've seen that a lot with the average income. At Chrisman 2, for example, they underwrote the 80% units at 60% in case they couldn't rent them at 80%, and lo and behold, they had trouble renting those units at 70 and 80%.
And they still are.
Yeah.
They're keeping that incentive in place.
Yeah. So when we negotiated the Willoughby Corner agreement at BCHA, we were forced to market the max rents. and we were not allowed to offer discounts, which we argued for at that time because of the senior population in that project. But it really depends. One of the reasons why we did this marketing effort was if we needed to go back to our lenders and investors and say, we need to lower the rents. We cannot rent these units. Historically, we have struggled to rent them, the income limits and the rents are too high, and they're sitting vacant, and they're causing us to not meet our debt coverage service ratio. We have to get their permission to do that. We can't just lower them on our own. Briarwood we can because we own that outright. And for the units that don't have home or a PDD, we have a little bit more control. But for LIHTC projects, you cannot just reduce rents whenever you want. So
That's what drove that question. Maybe was that one where you said you can rent the same property for that amount on the market. How does it get set for that height to begin with?
that's HUD. Yeah, and it's by county. And I would say Boulder County and the mountain regions have the highest rents due to our income levels. And that's why we're seeing a lot of seniors leave. They're either going to lower cost counties and cities, or they're leaving Colorado completely. Because it's just too expensive. And it's not just the rent, it's the food. They can't get, I actually have a petition here that I wanted to bring up. Spring Creek Apartments filed a petition to community food share because they reduced the number of food share visits from 2 a month to 1, and they're struggling. They can't afford to buy food, and they're getting less, these organizations have less funding, so they're doing less service. And it's harming our residents. And so it is a multi-faceted issue that we can't just solve it on our own. That speaks to the federal budget issues and moving things to the state. The state's already, in a shortfall. The counties and the cities are already cutting funds. I mean, we saw Boulder County cut funds significantly for nonprofits last year.
So let me throw something out here along the lines of that food. The senior center once a month is offering a free food market. People just have to be able to get there. So the food is there.
But the transportation's not.
Yeah, they just need to be able to get there. It started last month for the first time, and people got there.
Okay.
So
Are they using the Ride Longmont?
I don't know what they're using, whether the family's bringing them or what, because
Is that something that seems like a good fit for our VIA contract for the grocery shopping?
it sounds like a good idea.
It doesn't seem like it's out of line with what the intent was already, what we're already
Right.
doing.
And they could actually go around to different places and pick them up, yeah. The thing with the VIA contract is, I think we're getting overcharged, I'm pretty sure we are, but, yeah. And I don't know how long it's gonna continue, that's the other thing, beyond
The
this
senior
year.
service.
Beyond this year, no, the VIA
Oh,
contract.
Yeah, we're funded through.
But I think it's something to look into because if we can get them there, the food is there. Can we go the other way? You mean to take the food?
I don't think they have the staffing capacity and the transportation.
It is in the center that runs it. It's the advisory council, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while it's reduced the number of visits a month, I think, and I don't know if you know, to 2 or 3 from like every week. There's the grocery shopping at the R Center too. And I actually got, to bring this up, a lot of like flyers and things that to put up. Obviously I didn't want to just like go do that, but I wanted to bring it up to you guys to see if that's helpful, because yeah, I mean, the groceries are just, it's astronomically bad. So if that would be helpful at any of the properties, I'd be happy to bring those too for you guys.
Yeah, I think the hard thing for the seniors is actually going somewhere to get
Right.
it. A lot of them drive, but they don't want to, or they don't drive.
You know?
And so having the services come on site is crucial. We've had a lot of pushes with Meals on Wheels. But yeah, I think it's just a hard time for everybody.
Yeah, well, there is still a twice a month bus that goes out, which hits them, each property.
We have people who deliver food to volunteers. Someone's organization, one of my daughters delivered food
Yeah.
some of our properties before.
Cultivate is the one, we've had them come speak at all the properties. I don't know if there's hesitation to utilize that service. They basically, you can email, call, and give them your grocery list, and they will go shop for you, and they charge it all to their organization, and then they reimburse themselves after the fact. So they keep your credit card on file, but they don't, it's not like they take your card and go shop with it. It's secured, but I think people are just hesitant, and even though you can have all the services, people have to take advantage of them, so it's like a twofold issue.
Part of
Yes,
the-
that would be helpful if you have flyers and things. We'll make sure our community managers put those up.
Part of the ride Longmont piece and going to places, so we got an update from Ride Longmont. And they do have a lot of older adults using Ride Longmont, but they're also using it almost, it's a social connection. Where in the Ride Longmont, the interaction with the drivers and things like that, it's not only for them, in some cases, what they're saying, getting from point A to point B, there's also just this inherent social connection that they may not have. And so that's another piece that they're looking at with Ride Longmont.
Like 100, I've seen that, I've taken that maybe 5 times, and 4 of those times there's been, elderly people, there's definitely conversation that's going on, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely true.
Just to round this out so we can get to Sarah's updates. We had a recent bill change at the state level requiring any new projects after January 1 funded through DOLA or LIHTC to allow pets. LHA is, all of our properties are pet free with the exception of Hearthstone and Lodge, which HUD says we have to allow pets. So we allow service animals. Double checked with our attorney that this won't affect a cent, so it's not like we have to scramble to create a pet policy, but we'll be creating a pet policy for any future developments that we build after January 1, 2026.
Oh, so it's only new properties, not
Only new,
existing?
yeah, new properties that get DOLA funding or LIHTC credits. So that'll be a condition of being awarded LIHTC credits. And then that ties into our larger policy work. We're working to catalog, update, and draft policies and procedures for LHA for management, maintenance, compliance, voucher, admin, accounting, and any regulatory and legal policies and procedures. This will help strengthen our process and improve outcomes, also set the groundwork for implementation of policy and procedure to improve through leasing and unit turns, onboarding and orientation for staff, because we currently have 0 orientation and onboarding. It's a little bit crazy. When you join our staff, you just get bombarded with lots of information and nothing to refer to. Reducing errors and costs across the portfolio. So that's really being led by Tracy, our compliance manager, who also oversees our voucher program. And so we'll be, in the future, start bringing certain policies and procedures. Some will need to be approved by the board, some won't. But we'll probably at least discuss them, and there will eventually be a repository of all the different policies and procedures that we have. We recently had an accountant join our team with Kendra's group, Angela Robinson. She joined a couple weeks ago. Scarlett Silva will be starting at the end of this month as our clinician 2 at the Suites. This is the 3rd clinician position that was funded through LHA, and then we added marijuana tax funding to increase the position from a clinician 1 to a clinician 2. We were just really struggling to find someone that had a bilingual, was bilingual, that had the requirements and the pay level, honestly. We were not getting anyone who met all the requirements that we wanted, so we ended up bumping that up to a clinician 2, and we did find someone who I think is going to be a great addition to the team working there. We have a vacant assistant community manager role, and this was the vacancy created when we promoted Jackie, who was overseeing Village on Main Briarwood. And so we haven't really focused on filling this role just because this role really was going to be the assistant at VOM Briarwood, Aspen Meadows Senior, and Aspen Meadows Neighborhood. And with everything going on at Aspen Meadows, and Jackie's really sort of been an amazing community manager at VOM. Like, They've been okay without the assistance, but going forward, we are going to need it, especially with the sun opening up. It's gonna be all hands on deck for Lisa. So we'll start looking for that role now. Just an update on staffing switches. Nikki and Jonna swapped properties. Nikki's taking over Suites and Zinnia, Jonna's taking over Hearthstone and Lodge. And so we really needed to give some reprieve to Jonna. Managing 100 plus PSH units is a lot. And we offered her a break and she took it. So she is now one of our quietest group of properties. Learning a new process. The 202 program is unique and different from LITEC, so she's definitely not bored. And then Nikki was up for the challenge at Zinnia and Suites, and we have Kat there as well. Kat is our assistant at Suites. And then we're in hiring discussions for management and maintenance as well as custodial services for Ascent, gearing up to get ready for that. So we'll hire ahead of openings so that those people can be cross-trained, especially maintenance. Because maintenance touches every property with on-calls.
Okay, Sarah.
Our met detectors are in, they're all in for Ascent. Camera update, Briarwood, and I know Lauren said that. And we're also waiting for Aspen Meadow Neighborhood. I guess some equipment is in China, or was, and our company, Baltech, is still waiting for just some of the equipment. We have all the cameras, we just need some of the equipment that goes with it to hang them and install. I plan on doing a training per request, Quincy, on the cameras with all the community managers, just on how to navigate it. It's pretty simple when you get in there, but it's just a little much when you want to pull it up and need to track something down and you're not for sure. So I plan on doing that with them probably in the next couple weeks. And then calls for service, since May, so we're thinking about May here. The Suites had 46 and 15 of those were all core calls, doing welfare checks and checking on residents. Hearthstone had 2, the Lodge had 6, Fall River had 2, Spring Creek 1, Briarwood 0, which is pretty interesting, it's been that way for some time. BOM had 1, and then AMN had 7, we had a unit there that we did 5 welfare checks in the same unit, so that was a person who was going through some things in the last few months. And then AMSA just had 3, and 2 of those were medical calls, so.
I think for Joshua's knowledge, I just did it, Josh's knowledge. I was looking at your email address on our list of terms. Meth detectors, what is that? So we've been working for some time to gain access to, there's a company out of New Zealand that creates meth detectors and really it's a silent alarm system. What we have talked about doing, well, what we are doing, what we've been developing for some time is when and why would we use those for either new build units or units that have been certified clean by an industrial hygienist because they've gone through a meth remediation. Then we are planning on putting these in the units. We have a lease addendum, says you have a meth detector in your unit. If you smoke meth, it will alert. And the main thing is what we're trying to do is prevention. That's our main goal. However, we could use that. You cannot evict for meth use unless you can tie it to that person specifically. And the only way to tie it to that person specifically if they are the original tenant or the first tenant after a certified clean. In that case, you can attempt to go through the tenant for the damages. Not that we would actually, it would be likely sent to collections, but we can at least use that in court if we need to. Because down units for meth, when there's no longer insurance to cover it, it is a huge drain on the system. So this is our first ones that we would have. We've been testing them in common spaces and facilities just to make sure that they were, legit. And so we have gone ahead and purchased them, and they plan to go into the Ascent units.
What's the price point on those?
$500 per meth detector, and then there's a yearly cost that Harold and our vendor Dan, they were able to come to an agreement, and I couldn't tell you the yearly cost on the
It's basically kind of like a network access type thing.
Yeah,
It's
it's for the
all-
tour.
We're working with them, so Sarah's actually turned into part of their R&D department. So it was, batteries at first, so they tested them in my office. And it's really interesting because, like if Sarah was out in the field and she came into my office, we'd see it blip because it's that sensitive. So we know that typically active smoking is 60 parts per million. But so then they switched the batteries because one of mine caught on fire because it was those lithium ion batteries, and it caught on fire in my office. And now they switched to alkaline. Now they're developing a hardwired component, and then I think the next thing is going to be developing a different SIM card so that we can actually tie it into either our own internal LTE system that we're building or do Wi-Fi access. So she's really been also partnering with them on the R&D piece. And I think the next conversation is really looking at a broader community kind of contract or even just people who rent locations.
Is there some sort of notification if a resident wants to disable it?
Yes, there's a tilt tamper alert.
And it works too, because we set it off a lot and we're fine with it.
How much does that have to go tonight?
And just so you know, if you ever look at it, they had them in Jefferson County Courthouse in the restrooms. So we put them in our restrooms, in our library, and other city facilities. But they had one there and somebody tampered with it and it set off. And they responded and they actually saw the person running out. So
is it noise coming from the equipment, or did you say the silence?
it's silent. So they just see it because before they used to have a big tag that said meth detector on it. So they've moved away from that now, although we're fine with them putting it in ours. But, so they moved away from it in our restrooms, and now we just have a sign that says there's a meth detector in operation. Because it was so overt in those public areas that, yeah, they would just pull it down. But, I mean, that's on a significant contamination. I think we're maybe paying $2,000 a year per detector. You have one that's contamination, and it's big works out.
We're pushing our time here. Is there anything else you want to say? Does anybody on the board want to say anything? I just have one request. I would like to see, assuming he still works for us, Leo, I would like to have him come and talk to us sometime and just tell us what's going on, what he's seeing, all that kind of stuff. Not Brandy, but Leo.
I'll make sure he's here next time.
Okay, good.
We had talked about doing a presentation when they had their data roll in.
Follow up on that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll figure it out.
Sometime, yeah. Okay, just need a motion to adjourn.
Who's adjourned?
Second.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you. We'll see you on August 12th.